It was a night like any other at the Los Cuatro Estaciones restaurant in Madrid, when everything changed forever. Rashid Al-Mansouri, the feared Emirati billionaire in Europe, was having dinner with his business partners when he accidentally spilled wine on his €3,000 jacket. Furious, he began shouting in Arabic at the nearest waitress, Carmen Vega, a 24-year-old who worked there to pay for her college education. What Rashid didn't know was that Carmen had lived in Abu Dhabi for 6 years with her diplomat father. He spoke perfect Arabic and had just heard every word of their insults. When Carmen responded fluently in her native language, even correcting him grammatically, the silence that fell over the restaurant was deafening. But what happened in the following minutes would prove that sometimes fate uses the wounded pride of a powerful man to introduce him to the one person capable of changing his life forever. The Los Cuatro Estaciones restaurant was considered one of the most exclusive in Madrid. Located in the heart of Salamanca, with its crystal chandeliers and views of Plaza de Colón, it attracted wealthy clients from all over the world. Carmen Vega had been working there for 2 years, ever since she began her studies in international relations at Complut University. At 24, she was one of the most sought-after waitresses. He spoke 4 languages. He had a smile that put even the most difficult customers at ease and knew how to move elegantly between the tables of the powerful. That October night, Carmen was wearing the restaurant's navy blue uniform, a crisp white shirt, a blue vest with a gold logo, and the professional demeanor she had perfected over the years. He was serving at the main table, where Rashid Al-Mansouri, 42, one of the richest men in the United Arab Emirates, was having dinner with his Spanish partners to discuss a multi-million-dollar investment in Madrid's real estate sector. Rashid was used to being the center of attention wherever he went, tall, distinguished, with a neat beard and tailored suits. He carried with him that aura of power that only billions can give. He spoke Spanish with a slight accent that many women found fascinating, but beneath his elegance lay a proud and often arrogant character, shaped by a life where he had always gotten everything he wanted. The evening proceeded normally. Carmen served the dishes with her usual professionalism. He filled the glasses with 2015 Ribera del Duero wines. He smiled politely when Rashid and his guests talked loudly about their multi-million-dollar businesses. She was used to these clients, powerful men who often looked at her as part of the furniture, useful but invisible. Then the unthinkable happened. As Carmen leaned forward to serve the second course, Rashid made a sweeping gesture with his hand to emphasize a point and tapped his wine glass. Rivera spilled on his Armani jacket, staining the gray silk with a dark red stain. The silence that fell over the table was immediate and heavy. Rashid looked at the stain in disbelief. Then his face turned red with anger. At that moment, all his Western education vanished, replaced by the wounded pride of a man accustomed to absolute perfection. He started shouting in Arabic, his voice echoing throughout the restaurant. The words came out like projectiles, loaded with contempt and anger. He accused Carmen of being an incompetent waitress, a clumsy servant who didn't even know how to hold a tray. He used expressions that are particularly offensive in Arabic, those that a man of his position should never say to a woman. The other customers turned to look, some shocked by the tone, even though they didn't understand the words. Rashid's partners looked embarrassed, but didn't dare intervene. The restaurant manager approached nervously, unsure how to handle the situation without offending one of the most important customers. Carmen stood still at the table, the tray still in her hand. Her face was impassive, but in her brown eyes shone something that Rashid couldn't decipher. When he finished his tirade, convinced that she had put that Spanish waitress who dared to ruin her evening in her place, Carmen calmly put down the tray. Then, with a clear and firm voice, he began to speak in perfect Arabic. Not only did he respond to each of her accusations, but he did so with a linguistic precision that left Rashid speechless. Carmen pointed out that he had used incorrect grammar in the last sentence, that he had mispronounced a word, and above all, that he had displayed poor manners, which were not appropriate for a man of his social standing. The restaurant fell into absolute silence. Rashid stared at Carmen as if he were seeing a ghost. His partners exchanged incredulous glances. The restaurant manager had his mouth open. Carmen continued explaining in Arabic that she had lived in Abu Dhabi for 6 years, where her father worked as a Spanish diplomat, that she had studied Arab culture and respected its traditions, but that what she had just heard had nothing to do with the hospitality and courtesy that characterized the true Arab spirit. Rashid al-Mansouri, the man who commanded a $20 billion empire, the man who had never apologized to anyone in his life, was completely speechless. At that moment, he understood that he had just met something very strange, a person who wasn't afraid of him, who wasn't impressed by his power, and who, above all, had the culture and intelligence to put him in his place. For the first time in 42 years, Rashid al-Mansouri felt small. In the minutes following Carmen's speech, Rashid remained motionless in his chair, staring at her with an expression that no one present could decipher. It was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something that felt dangerously like admiration. Carmen, after finishing her answer, took the tray and continued serving as if nothing had happened. She moved with the same elegance as always, but now there was something different in her bearing, a new confidence, the awareness of having defended her dignity without losing her professionalism. Rashid looked at the stain on his jacket, then at Carmen, who was calmly serving the table next to him. For the first time in his life, he realized how inappropriate his behavior had been. In the education he had received at the best schools in London and the United States, he had been taught that a true gentleman never raises his voice to a woman regardless of her social position. But there was something else that troubled him. Carmen's command of Arabic was not that of a university student who had studied the language from books. He was fluent, natural, with an accent that betrayed years of life in the Arab world. How a Spanish waitress had managed to learn her mother tongue too. His partners tried to get the conversation going again about their investments, but Rashid was completely distracted. He continued watching Carmen as she moved between the tables, noticing details that had previously escaped him, the way he kept his back straight, the elegance in his movements, the intelligence that shone through in his gaze. That was no ordinary waitress. When Carmen passed by their table again to serve dessert, Rashid stopped her for the first time that night. His voice was calm and respectful. He apologized in Spanish first, then in Arabic. A formal apology, the kind that is made between equals, not the kind of condescending apology that a rich person makes to an employee to get forgiveness. Carmen looked at him for a few seconds before answering. She accepted his apology with a simple nod, but Rashid saw in her eyes that forgiveness wasn't automatic. It had to be earned. Then Carmen did something that completely baffled him. He asked her if she wanted him to call the dry cleaners that worked with the restaurant to get the jacket cleaned urgently. I knew the owner, a craftsman who also worked at night for the guests of the Villa Magna Hotel. The wine stain could be removed if treated within an hour. Rashid agreed more to prolong the interaction than out of real need. I had enough money to buy 100 identical jackets. But that proposal showed him that Carmen, despite everything, continued to do her job with dedication. While they waited for the dry cleaner to arrive, Rashid started asking questions. I wanted to know more about that waitress who spoke Arabic better than many of her compatriots. Carmen responded with polite professionalism, recounting her 6 years in Abu Dhabi, her father's diplomatic studies, and her passion for different cultures. Rashid discovered that Carmen was studying international relations with a specialization in the Middle East, that she spoke Arabic, English, French, and Catalan, in addition to Spanish, and that her dream was to work in international organizations to foster dialogue between diverse cultures. The more he listened to her, the more he realized how superficial his first impression had been. Carmen wasn't just a waitress. She was a cultured, intelligent young woman with a worldview rarely found in her social circles. When the dry cleaner arrived and took the jacket away, Rashid realized he didn't want that conversation to end. For the first time in years, he was talking to someone who wasn't interested in his money, who didn't flatter him, who simply treated him as a human being. He asked Carmen if she would like to have a coffee after work so they could continue talking. She politely declined, explaining that she had classes early in the morning and needed to study. Rashid accepted the refusal without insisting, but as he left the restaurant with his clean jacket and his partners, he knew that something had changed in him that night. For the first time in 42 years, Rashid Al-Mansouri was genuinely interested in getting to know a person who had nothing to gain from his friendship, and this both frightened and fascinated him. 2 weeks after that memorable night, Carmen had resumed her normal routine when Rashid reappeared on the Four Seasons. This time he was alone, without the usual entourage of partners. He wore a more sober suit and had a different, less arrogant air. Carmen saw him enter while she was preparing the tables. The waiter escorted him to the best table, but Rashid specifically asked to be served by her. When Carmen approached with the letter, he greeted her in Arabic with a smile that seemed sincere. Rashid ordered the tasting menu, but it was clear he hadn't come for the food. As Carmen served, he began to talk. In the previous 2 weeks, he had reflected a lot on their conversation, realizing how little he knew of the world outside of his wealth. Throughout the evening, Rashid asked intelligent questions about the political situation in the Middle East, Carmen's career, and her studies, demonstrating that he was well informed about the topics that interested her. Carmen gradually began to open up, sharing her passion for diplomacy and her dream of working for the United Nations. Towards the end of the evening, Rashid made an unexpected proposal. His company, Alman Holdings, needed consultants who understood Western and Arab cultures. He offered her a paid internship in his Madrid office. Market analysis, relations with Arab clients, translations. The salary was 3 times that of the restaurant. Carmen was surprised, asked for time to reflect, and Rashid agreed, leaving her his business card. Before leaving, he apologized again, saying that she had taught him an unforgettable lesson in humility. That night, Carmen didn't sleep. The offer was professionally attractive, but I didn't understand Rashid's true motivations. Her roommate, Sarah, put her on guard. Maybe he was just using his wealth to win over a girl who had challenged him. After 3 days of reflection, Carmen decided to accept, but with clear conditions. Strictly professional relationship, no favoritism. Evaluation based only on merit. Rashid immediately agreed to all the conditions, seeming genuinely happy with the choice. Carmen didn't know that phone call would change her whole life. First day at Al-Mansouri Holdings. Are you enjoying the story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now we continue with the video. Carmen showed up at the ASCO offices at 8 o'clock sharp. The skyscraper housed some of Madrid's most important companies, and Rashid's office occupied the entire 30th floor, offering stunning views of the city. Rashid personally welcomed her, introducing her to the team as the new consultant for the Middle Eastern markets. Carmen was assigned to an expansion project in Saudi Arabia, which required market analysis and negotiations with local partners. The work was stimulating and complex, exactly what I had always dreamed of. In the first few days, Rashid maintained the required professional distance. He behaved with her as he did with the other employees. Courteous but not familiar, demanding but fair. Carmen began to relax, realizing that she had perhaps misjudged his intentions. The Saudi project proved complicated. Local partners were wary of the presence of a woman on the team. Although her skills were essential, Carmen had to demonstrate her professionalism every day, earning respect through concrete results. Rashid watched his progress with quiet admiration. Carmen had an approach that combined analytical intelligence and cultural sensitivity, finding creative solutions to seemingly intractable problems. One night, working late for an important presentation, Rashid and Carmen found themselves alone in the office. He brought her a coffee, and for the first time, they started talking about something beyond work. Rashid spent his childhood in Dubai. Carmen spent her years in Abu Dhabi. They discovered they had a lot in common. They had both lived among different cultures, traveled extensively, and felt the weight of expectations. From that moment on, the relationship began to evolve from purely professional to something deeper. The Saudi project was completed with extraordinary success. The deal was worth $500 million, and Carmen had played a crucial role. Rashid offered him a permanent position with increasing responsibilities and offered to pay for his master's degree at the London School of Economics. Carmen accepted both proposals, understanding that Rashid truly believed in her abilities. It was the beginning of a relationship that would change both of them in unimaginable ways. 6 months after starting work at Al Mansouri Holdings, Carmen had become one of the most respected members of the team. His office was always full of colleagues who came to him for advice on international projects, and Rashid increasingly relied on his judgment for the most important strategic decisions. The relationship between them had evolved into something unique. They weren't friends in the traditional sense, but they had developed a professional complicity rarely seen in the business world. Rashid consulted Carmen not only on issues related to the Middle East, but on any problem that required a different perspective than his own. Carmen had started her online master's degree at the LSE, studying in the evenings after work. Rashid had kept his promise to support her studies, but without ever weighing her down or expecting anything in return. On the contrary, he often encouraged her to take breaks when he saw that she was too tired. One spring day, while working on an expansion project in Morocco, Rashid received a phone call that changed his life. Carmen saw him turn pale, then rush out of the office without saying a word. When he returned 2 hours later, his eyes were red and he looked 10 years older. Carmen didn't dare ask what had happened, but that evening, while they were the last ones left in the office, Rashid started talking. His father had died suddenly of a heart attack in Dubai. He had to leave immediately to organize the funeral and manage the succession of the family empire. Carmen saw Rashid for the first time, vulnerable, scared, alone. Despite all his wealth and success, when his father died, he was simply a son who had lost the most important person in his life. Without thinking twice, Carmen offered her help, not for work reasons, but as a human being. If I needed someone to talk to, help managing relations with the Spanish media, or simply a friendly presence, she was there. Rashid looked at her in surprise. In 42 years, few people had offered support without wanting something in return. He thanked him, but said he had to face this situation alone, as his father had always taught him. Rashid left for Dubai and was away for 3 weeks. Carmen managed Spanish affairs with a skill that amazed everyone, coordinating ongoing projects and making important decisions that always proved successful. When Rashid returned, he seemed changed. The time in Dubai, immersed in family traditions and the responsibilities of succession, had made him reflect on his life. He realized how alone he was, despite being surrounded by hundreds of employees and collaborators. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Rashid asked Carmen if she would have dinner with him, not because of work, but because he needed to talk to someone who really knew him. Carmen agreed, realizing that she missed their conversations too. They went to a small Lebanese restaurant in the center of Madrid, far from the places frequented by their colleagues. Rashid told Carmen about the pressure he felt to continue his father's work, the expectations of his family, and the loneliness he experienced despite all his success. Carmen listened to him without judgment, offering her perspective when he asked for it. He told him that perhaps his father's true legacy was not the billions, but the values he had passed on to him: honesty in business, respect for his collaborators, and the determination to achieve goals. That dinner marked a turning point. From that moment on, Rashid and Carmen began seeing each other regularly outside of the office, always maintaining a respectful relationship, but becoming true friends. Rashid discovered in Carmen a conversation partner he had never had before, intelligent, cultured, but above all genuine. Carmen began to see Rashid for who he really was, not the arrogant millionaire he seemed to have at first glance, but a complex, intelligent man who carried the weight of enormous responsibilities and, like everyone else, needed someone to appreciate him for who he was, not for what he owned. They both realized that they were becoming more than just friends, but neither dared to admit it. Carmen, because she was afraid that feelings would compromise the professional relationship that she found so rewarding. Rashid, because for the first time in his life, he was afraid of being rejected by someone who really mattered. Fate, however, was about to force them to confront their feelings in ways they could never have imagined. The turning point came during a business trip to London. Rashid and Carmen were scheduled to meet with the executives of a British bank to negotiate a significant financing deal. It was the largest project they had ever worked on together, and its success depended on their ability to perfectly coordinate business strategy and cultural sensitivity. The negotiations lasted 3 intense days. Carmen excelled in the technical presentations, demonstrating a mastery of financial details that surprised even Rashid. He masterfully managed the strategic aspects, but completely relied on Carmen's judgment for the nuances that could make the difference between success and failure. On the final night, after closing the deal on better-than-expected terms, Rashid and Carmen found themselves walking along the Thames in London. It was illuminated by the night lights, and for the first time in months, they both felt relaxed, without the pressure of work weighing them down. It was Carmen who spoke first. She told him how much she had grown professionally in recent months, how much she had learned working with him. But above all, she confessed that she had begun to see him not as a boss or a mentor, but as the man she was falling in love with. Rashid stopped dead in his tracks. For months he had dreamed of hearing those words, but now that Carmen had spoken them, he was overwhelmed with fear. He told her that he felt the same way, but that the difference in their social positions, the age difference, and the different expectations of their families made everything impossible. Carmen looked him straight in the eyes and said something he would never forget. Love knows no social goals, age differences, or family expectations. What counts is whether two people respect each other, value each other, and are willing to build something together. Rashid kissed her on the banks of the Tesses, a kiss that tasted of fear and hope at the same time. At that moment, they both understood that there was no turning back. The return to Madrid was complicated. They had to decide how to manage their relationship in the workplace, how to deal with gossip from colleagues, and how to reconcile their feelings with the professionalism they had always put first. Rashid suggested that Carmen transfer her to another division of the company to avoid conflicts of interest, but she refused. He wanted their relationship to remain private without compromising the work they had both worked so hard for. They found a balance that worked. Absolute professionalism in the office, completely separate private life. Colleagues began to notice that Rashid seemed more relaxed, that he smiled more, that he treated everyone more kindly. Carmen was more self-confident, more proactive, more of a leader. The relationship grew day by day. Rashid discovered what it meant to have someone who loved him for who he was, not for what he owned. Carmen learned that behind the image of the successful millionaire was a man capable of tenderness, vulnerability, and authentic generosity. A year after that kiss in London, Rashid asked Carmen to marry him, not with a grand proposal or expensive gifts, but simply during one of their evening walks around the retreat, telling her that he could no longer imagine his life without her. Carmen agreed on the condition that the marriage would be a celebration of love, not a display of wealth. Rashid agreed to each of their requests. Simple ceremony. Guests chosen from among family and true friends. No press or advertising. The wedding took place at a small estate in Toledo with the blessing of Carmen's father, who had grown to appreciate Rashid for the man he had become, and of Rashid's family, who had finally seen their son as happy and serene as he had never been before. Carmen never stopped working. Instead, with Rashid's support, he opened his own international relations consulting firm, specializing in intercultural dialogue. Rashid became his first client and greatest advocate. Points. They built not only a family, but also an empire based on different principles than those Rashid had inherited. An empire where respect for people came before profit, where cultural diversity was seen as wealth, where success was also measured by the ability to improve the lives of others. 5 years after that night, in the restaurant that had changed everything, Rashid and Carmen watched the sunset from the terrace of their house in Madrid. She was holding her newborn daughter, Layla, who had inherited her mother's green eyes and her father's determined character. Rashid often thought about how a wine stain on a jacket had led to the most important encounter of his life. Carmen reflected on how the courage to respond to an arrogant man in perfect Arabic had opened the doors to a future she had never dared to dream of. They had both learned that true love is not based on social or economic differences, but on the ability of two people to grow together, to respect each other, and to build something greater than the sum of their individual parts. That night, As Layla slept peacefully in her mother's arms and the sun set over Madrid, Rashid and Carmen knew they had found the greatest treasure, the love that transforms, that makes you grow, that makes you better. Because in the end, the only thing that really counts is not how much you have, but how much you are capable of loving and being loved in return. Like if you believe that love can overcome any social barrier. Comment on which moment in history had the greatest impact on you. Share to inspire those who still believe in the love that transforms. Subscribe for more stories of second chances and life-changing love. Sometimes it takes the courage of an answer to change everything. Sometimes wounded pride becomes the gateway to true humility. And sometimes the most beautiful love is born from mutual respect and growth together. Because true power is not in dominating, but in knowing how to recognize the value of others. Yeah,